They drained my pond while I was out of town, and by the time I got back, half of it was gone. I stood there with my suitcase still in my hand, staring at mud where clear water had been just a week earlier, and I knew right away this wasn't nature, this wasn't drought, and it sure as hell wasn't an accident. Somebody had taken what belonged to me while I was away. And the worst part was they were standing right next door, acting like they'd done nothing wrong. My name is Owen Mercer, and I live outside a little town called Briar Glen in western Tennessee. Nothing fancy out here. Long gravel roads, mailboxes leaning sideways, old oak trees everywhere. I bought my place in late 2021 after 15 years of construction work and more overtime than I care to remember. 3.5 acres, modest house, wraparound porch, and out back. The reason I fell in love with it. A spring-fed pond tucked against the tree line. That pond had personality. Sounds ridiculous saying that out loud, I know, but it did. In the mornings, the water looked silver. Around sunset, it turned dark blue and reflected the sky so clean it almost looked painted. Bass swam near the reeds, turtles would climb onto the rocks on warm afternoons, and every now and then deer would wander over for a drink. My daughter Ellie used to sit on the dock and toss breadcrumbs in like she was hosting a fish convention. It was peaceful, and for almost 2 years. Stayed that way. Then the field behind my property sold. Everybody in town knew the buyer before I ever met him. Grant Calloway, real estate developer out of Nashville, expensive boots, expensive truck, expensive smile, the kind of guy who somehow manages to sound friendly while talking down to you. Within a month, equipment rolled in, bulldozers, survey crews, flatbed trailers, word spread fast. Grant was building a private lakeside event venue, weddings, retreats, company parties. All dressed up rustic with string lights and a waterfront patio. Folks in town were split on it. Half loved the idea. The other half figured Briar Glen didn't need imported city money turning farmland into Instagram scenery. First time Grant and I talked, he was standing near our shared property line with a contractor and a tablet. He looked at my pond, then looked at me. "Beautiful water," he said. I nodded. He asked, "Ever overflow after storms?" "Nope." "Really?" "Been stable for decades." He gave me this thoughtful little smile and tapped something on his screen. "Well, good drainage matters around here." Then he walked off. At the time, I didn't think much of it, probably should have. A month later, my wife convinced me to finally take a trip. Just 4 days in Gatlinburg with the kids. Cabin, hiking trails, pancakes bigger than your face. Normal family stuff. I barely checked my phone. By Thursday afternoon, we pulled back into the driveway. Ellie jumped out first, then stopped. "Dad," her voice made my stomach drop before I even saw it. The pond was wrong, smaller, way smaller. The shoreline had pulled back several feet. Mud banks curled around the edge. The dock posts looked taller because the water had dropped so low. Fish were packed near the center, barely moving. For a second, I just stood there trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Then I saw the trench, fresh dirt piled along the fence line, deep, wide, machine cut. I followed it. Every step made my pulse hit harder. It ran straight behind the trees, crossed the property line, and disappeared into Grant Calloway's construction site. And there it was. A thick drainage pipe pulling water from my spring line and pouring it into a massive basin carved into the middle of his venue, his artificial lake. My water hit the basin in a steady rush while excavators shaped the banks around it. A couple workers looked up at me. I couldn't even speak for a second. Then I asked the nearest guy who approved this. He looked uncomfortable immediately. "Mr. Calloway." I walked straight across that dirt lot toward Grant's temporary office trailer. Didn't knock, didn't care. He was inside leaning over blueprints with an iced coffee like it was any normal afternoon. He glanced up and smiled. "Owen," I pointed back toward the pond. "You drained my water." His smile barely moved. "No," he said calmly. "We redirected runoff." "That's not runoff," he leaned back. "Water systems around here overlap." "No, my pond doesn't overlap," he shrugged. "Underground spring patterns aren't always obvious." I could feel heat in my face. "Did you ask permission?" He lifted his coffee. "Honestly, it's already installed." Like that settled it, like because he'd done it already. I was supposed to just live with it. Then he added something I still remember word for word. "This project's bringing a lot of value to this town, Owen. Sometimes small adjustments help everybody." Small adjustments, that's what he called stealing half my pond. I looked at him for a long second, then I said, "You really should have asked." He smirked, and that smirk told me exactly what kind of man I was dealing with. A man who thought expensive plans mattered more than somebody else's land. A man who assumed if he moved fast enough, nobody could stop him. I walked out without another word, went home. pulled every property document I had. Survey maps, boundary filings, county records, and sitting there at my kitchen table with mud still on my boots and my daughter watching fish struggle through the back window, I found exactly what I needed, because that pond, and every inch feeding into it, was mine, and Grant Calloway had just made the biggest mistake of his life. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the muddy shoreline and Ellie standing there with tears in her eyes asking if the fish were gonna die. And maybe that was the part Grant never understood. It wasn't just water. It wasn't landscaping. It wasn't some empty patch of land on a county map. That pond was part of our home. It was birthdays on the dock, coffee before sunrise, my daughter learning how to cast a fishing line and pretending she could talk to turtles. People like Grant see land as potential profit. People like me. We live on it long enough that it becomes memory. By 6 the next morning, I had every document spread across my kitchen table. My wife Hannah brought coffee and quietly sat across from me while I went through survey maps. "You think he knew?" she asked. I looked up. "Yeah, completely," I nodded. "Completely." That was the thing. If this had been a misunderstanding, maybe there's a conversation. Maybe there's compromise. But he'd waited until we were out of town. That part mattered. He knew exactly what he was doing. The county survey showed the spring source clearly marked inside my property boundary. There was an older environmental filing from the previous owner, too. Apparently, they'd documented the underground feed 20 years ago during a conservation inspection. Grant's trench cut directly into that flow. No question. No gray area. And then I checked permit records. Nothing. No water diversion permit. No environmental variance. No approved drainage plan involving neighboring land. Nothing, which made me laugh, not happy laugh. That quiet, exhausted kind where you almost feel bad for the other guy because he clearly has no idea how badly he just boxed himself in. By 9, I called a local attorney named Clea Bennett. Everybody in Briar Glen knows Clea. Sharp as broken glass and patient right up until she decides not to be. I explained everything. She barely interrupted. Then I texted photos. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Her first words were, "How fast can you meet me?" I drove straight there. Clea spread the photos across her desk and stared for a second. Then she looked at me. "He diverted a protected water source from private property without permit approval. Sounds bad. It is bad. How bad?" She folded her hands. "If your records are clean, very bad." That afternoon, she brought in a hydrologist named Dr. Miles Carter from Knoxville. Older guy, gray beard, boots covered in red dirt, carried himself like somebody who'd spent 30 years explaining science to stubborn people. He walked the trench, measured flow, took groundwater samples, checked elevation, then stood beside me near the fence and said, "This wasn't accidental." I already knew. Still hearing it from someone else felt different. He engineered the trench to reduce pressure feeding your pond and redirect toward his basin. Whoever planned this knew exactly how spring-fed flow behaves. I looked over at Grant's site. Workers were hanging timber beams, building patio frames, moving like business as usual, like they had all the time in the world. Clea filed emergency injunction paperwork before sunset. Fast, precise. By the next morning, Grant got served, and for the first time since I met him, he came walking onto my property. He wasn't smiling. I was near the dock. He stopped a few feet away. "Owen." "This is excessive." I kept my eyes on the water. "Funny." He exhaled hard. "This can be resolved privately. You should have thought of that before digging." His tone sharpened. "My engineers believe the water source overlaps. Then your engineers can explain that in court." He looked toward the pond, then back at me. "You understand what this project brings to town? Do you understand what trespassing means?" He clenched his jaw, and there it was. That polished businessman mask slipping just enough. "This delay costs money," I shrugged. "Guess we both care about water now." He stared for another second, then turned and walked back. Court hearing happened 2 days later. Small county courtroom, wood benches, old ceiling fans. Half Briar Glen somehow showed up. Apparently rural towns treat legal drama like live entertainment. Grant came in wearing a navy suit worth more than my truck tires. His attorney did most of the talking. Claimed the diversion was temporary, minimal, part of a broader watershed adjustment. Said nobody could prove ownership of underground spring flow. Clea stood and calmly laid out survey maps, permit records, environmental documentation, photographs, and Dr. Carter's hydrology report. Then Dr. Carter testified, and that changed everything. He explained elevation lines, spring pressure, natural flow. how the trench had been intentionally angled to reduce water retention on my side while filling Grant's basin. Even the judge leaned forward. Grant's attorney tried pushing back. "Doctor, can you say with certainty the spring belongs solely to Mr. Mercer?" Dr. Carter adjusted his glasses. "I can say with certainty this trench was designed to drain water from his documented spring-fed pond into the adjacent excavation." Silence. Then Clea asked one question. "Would this damage the pond long-term?" Dr. Carter looked directly at the judge. "Yes." Grant shifted in his chair. The judge turned toward him. "Mr. Calloway, did you obtain county approval before redirecting water?" Grant hesitated, and in court, hesitation feels loud. "No." The judge nodded once. That was it. Emergency injunction granted. Immediate cease and removal. Work suspended. Pipe removal required within 24 hours. Site restoration pending review. You could feel the air change in the room. Grant's face lost color, and outside, it got even better. The next morning, county inspectors arrived before sunrise. Orange vests, clipboards, official trucks. Workers shut equipment down, excavators rolled back. The drainage pipe came out in sections, mud everywhere. Crews had to refill the trench and restore grade under supervision. I stood by the fence with coffee while Ellie watched beside me. She whispered, "Are we winning?" I smiled a little. "We're getting started." Water gradually stabilized over the next week, but damage had already happened. A handful of fish died, banks were eroded, plant life around the edges got hit hard. Dr. Carter recommended restoration work. Then Clea suggested we go further, not just stop him. Recover damages, every cent. Environmental specialist came out, full assessment, water recovery, habitat restoration, regrading, fish replacement, shoreline reinforcement. Total estimate came in just over $68,000, plus legal fees. Grant's team panicked. Suddenly they wanted mediation, private settlement, calls, emails, polite messages, a handwritten note from one of his project managers saying everyone regretted how things unfolded. I ignored every bit of it because while they were scrambling, something else started happening. Word spread fast. The town talked. And in a place like Briar Glen, reputation travels quicker than pickup trucks. People started posting photos of the trench online. Then someone shared county permit violations. Then a local wedding planner backed out. Then another. Then another. A friend at the hardware store told me half the county was discussing Grant Calloway over coffee and biscuits every morning. Nobody likes a developer, but a developer who drains a neighbor's pond while they're out of town. That story practically told itself. By the second month, his venue looked beautiful from a distance. Stone patio, wood pavilion, string lights, everything polished, but empty, no music, no bookings, no guests. And one evening while I was checking the pond's shoreline, my phone buzzed. It was Clea. Her voice sounded calm, almost too calm. "Trial ruling is scheduled." I stared across the water. Grant's fake lake was visible through the trees, still half-filled, still unfinished, still waiting. Clea said quietly, "Owen, I think this is about to get expensive for him." And for the first time since this whole mess started, I believed her. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I believed her. Funny thing about waiting on a court ruling. People think it feels dramatic every second, like some movie where music's building in the background and everybody's pacing around. Truth is, most of it feels weirdly normal. You still mow the lawn, still answer emails, still stop by the hardware store because you need mulch or screws or whatever. Life keeps moving, but underneath all of it, there's this hum sitting in your chest, that low, steady pressure, like something big is coming and everybody knows it. Over the next couple weeks, our pond slowly came back, not overnight. Spring water takes its time, but little by little the level rose. The muddy banks disappeared. The reeds straightened back out. A few mornings I'd stand there with coffee before sunrise and watch the surface smooth over like the land itself was breathing again. Ellie spotted turtles first, then bass. Then one afternoon she yelled from the dock like she discovered buried treasure. "Dad, they're back!" Minnows, dozens of them, swimming near the edge, and I'll admit, after everything, I just stood there smiling longer than I probably needed to. Some things matter more once you almost lose them. Meanwhile, Grant's place was turning into exactly the kind of mess money can't clean up. The venue itself looked expensive, beautiful even. The pavilion had cedar beams. The landscaping crew planted ornamental grass and imported flowering trees. He had lanterns hanging from pathways, stones seating around the basin, everything designed to look like some magazine spread, but nobody wanted it, because now every person in Briar Glen knew exactly where the water in that basin had come from. And people talk, wedding planners especially. One backed out publicly online. Said she preferred working with venues, built on community trust. That line spread fast, then a corporate retreat canceled, then another. Then rumors started that County Environmental Review might reopen permits tied to the property. Grant still tried, pretending none of it bothered him. I saw him once near the road talking to contractors, hands moving, trying to sound confident, but confidence looks different when half your project is stalled and every person passing by already knows the story. Then ruling day came. Clea met me outside county court. Cool morning, gray sky. She handed me coffee and said, "You ready?" Not even a little, she smiled. That's normal. Courtroom felt quieter than before. Even Grant looked different, still expensive suit, still polished, but tired, eyes sunken, jaw tight, like somebody who hadn't slept much either. The judge read through findings carefully. No rush, no theatrics, just facts, property boundaries clearly documented, protected spring source established, unauthorized diversion confirmed. No permits filed, intentional excavation, environmental damage directly linked, and then came the line I'll probably remember the rest of my life. The defendant knowingly altered private natural resources for commercial benefit without lawful approval. Grant stared straight ahead, didn't blink. Judge ordered full payment for restoration. $68,000, attorney fees, environmental monitoring costs, additional penalties through county compliance review. And because project delays tied directly to the unlawful diversion, those inspections paused future occupancy approval too. That one hit hardest. No occupancy approval meant no opening, no events, no guests, no revenue, nothing. Clea leaned over and whispered, "That's gonna sting." Understatement of the year. Grant finally stood after court, turned toward me. For a second I thought maybe he'd apologize, maybe pride finally gave out. Instead he said quietly, "You made this personal." And honestly, I almost laughed. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, you made it personal when you dug into my land while my family was away." His jaw tightened. Then he left, no speech, no final threat, just walked out. A month later, county crews finished final restoration review at our place. Everything passed, water levels stable, habitat recovering. The pond looked stronger than before. That same evening, Ellie sat on the dock swinging her feet over the edge. Sunset turning everything gold. She asked me, "Are they ever gonna open back there?" I looked through the trees. Grant's venue sat quiet, lights installed, tables stacked inside, lake basin still reflecting sunset, pretty from a distance, completely empty. There was a giant sign near the entrance, "Coming soon, been there ever since." I told her maybe. She thought about it, then smiled. "I kinda like our pond better." Honestly, me too. A few months later, Hannah and I were eating dinner on the porch when a truck drove past slowly. Then another. People still came by to look, not because there was anything happening, because there was, and somehow that made it even more satisfying. Grant had tried taking something living and real and meaningful, and turning it into a sales feature, a brochure photo, a booking package, a premium experience. He saw dollar signs, he saw scenery. He saw something he could borrow without asking because he figured nobody would push back. But land remembers. People remember too, especially in small towns. You can spend a fortune building something beautiful, but if the foundation starts with arrogance, eventually everybody sees the cracks. These days, mornings are quiet again. Coffee on the porch, fish near the reeds, Ellie talking to turtles like they owe her rent. Exactly how it used to be, maybe even better. Because peace feels different after you fight for it. And every once in a while, if the wind's right and I'm standing near the back fence, I can still see Grant's lakeside venue through the trees. Perfect landscaping, decorative lights. A waterfront project designed for hundreds of guests, still waiting, still silent, still empty, and I'll leave you with this. If someone knowingly crossed onto your land while you were gone, took something they thought they could get away with, and then called it good for the community after the fact, what would you have done? Would you have taken the settlement and moved on? Or would you have fought it all the way like I did? Drop your answer in the comments, tell me who you think was right and who crossed the line. And if you enjoy real stories about property disputes, neighbors, and the kind of justice that takes its sweet time but lands exactly where it should, hit like and subscribe. Because around here, there's always another story.